Mr. Vermal? Katie called, raising her hand. I think I saw a man with a gun outside. There is no combination of words more perfectly calibrated to turn the teacher's blood to ice. The horror only settled deeper in my chest when I watched my kids go crowding around the windows, chattering excitedly amongst themselves like shooting stars was going by. I don't see him. Where is he? Oh, he's right there, behind the tree. What's he look like? What's he doing? I couldn't see a thing out there myself. The thick, oppressive blanket of mountain fog that always settled on this school made visibly low in the best of times. All I could see was the endless ocean of trees disappearing into the backdrop of white. But I trusted my students and took their reports dead seriously. Get down, I finally shouted once I worked out the knot in my throat. Get down under the windows. Don't let them see you. It was the first time I'd raised my voice at these kids, and that scared them more than the man outside. The room was a cacophony of squeaking chairs and shoved desks as they rushed to hurtle under the windows. All the while, my heart was pounding in my ears as I scrambled to pull the Valkyrie straps over every window that would release the safety shutters. Every instant, I felt uncertain some homicidal maniac was about to take my head off with a .308 Winchester. I wasn't even just scared to die. I was scared of my students being forced to witness something like that. But I got lucky. Or maybe he had some mercy. The only way to reach the headmistress' personal phone was an old school red telephone that sat on my desk with a bit of tape reading for emergencies only. She'd always been very particular that she be called instead of the police in times like these. All I had to do was punch in 66 and she picked up in an instant. I'm embarrassed to imagine what I must have sounded like, the incomprehensible verbal diarrhea of a man who never dealt with a situation more deadly than a bicycle crash or a high fever. But luckily, she seemed to parse together exactly what I was getting at, and her stoic, commanding tone silenced my babbling in an instant. It would be dealt with. Sirens. Sirens started playing all over the school like it was about to be leveled by a tornado, or maybe nuclear Armageddon. Under the din, my students all frantically whispered to each other, trying to guess at what was going on. He's a hunter, was the consensus. That almost calmed me down. If he was just some hunter after the elk and mule deer up here in the Rockies, then no biggie, right? But for some reason, the word hunter seemed to strike the kids with terror. Outside, I heard the screech of tires and 2 rear doors being slammed open. My curiosity piqued. I seen that black van labeled security parked in a lot, but never gotten a glimpse inside. Despite all my better judgment, I couldn't resist the tiniest peek under the corner of a shutter. Out of the van poured 2 individuals dressed less like school security guards and more like the sort of shadowy government agents you see in the movies. Black suits, shades, and earpieces fitting their perfect comb-overs. I think what I saw them do next was the moment that forever changed me, forever shattered my delusion that the universe is ultimately a rational and orderly place. The 2 guards checked off their equipment, dropped to all fours, and broke into a sprint. Under other circumstances, it would have been laughable. As it was, it stole my breath away. They ran not even like primates would, but with the exact speed and style of wolves. They must have been going about 15 miles per minimum. Human bodies just don't work that way. We can't twist our bodies in such a way to allow ourselves a full-bore gallop at that kind of speed. Our joints weren't meant to bend in those directions. They disappeared into the forest like hunting dogs, let loose upon the scent of prey. I jumped and a gas spread across the room as a gunshot erupted in those woods, and then another, 2 shots total, echoing down the foggy valleys of the mountain, scaring away the crows. Then came the long silence as I held my breath, waiting to see if the nightmare was all over or just beginning. And then the screams began. It started as a rumbling murmur, one I couldn't place. Then it acquired peaks and droves, reaching pitches that managed to strain my ears. At its height, it almost sounded louder than the gunshots had been. It was a man's voice, at least at first, but then it devolved into something that didn't sound human at all, like his vocal cords had been ripped in two. The only sounds he could still produce was to bay like a dying animal. Yet somehow, even that didn't horrify me as much as my students' reactions. They seemed relieved, even laughing amongst themselves as this proved we were out of danger. The screams dulled, the sirens disappeared, and my students returned to their seats, staring at me as expecting me to continue the lesson. It was all so surreal, like something out of a dream. Never before in my life I'd been surrounded by people yet felt so utterly alone. I tried not to break down in front of my students, but unlike my class, I couldn't just move past what had just happened, like it had all been no big deal. So like a sleepwalking man acting on instinct, I did the first thing I could think of. I called the headmistress again. Her tone was flat, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Vermal? I wanted to scream at her, but words failed me. I was panting like a dog. I took a drink of water with a shaky hand. I need to know what that was, Mr. Vermal. This phone is only to be used in cases of emergency. Emergency? This isn't an emergency? There was a shootout outside my classroom. Where's the police? The press? They're not coming, she said sternly. It was all a false alarm. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was hurt. Are you hearing yourself? I heard a man wail like he was being fed feet first into a meat. I caught myself glancing at my class. If you heard the things I've heard, you wouldn't be so. When I employed you under the auspices of the Integration Initiative, it was because I was assured of your dedication to teaching. Surely you recognize the importance of not allowing your class to fall even a day behind the schedule outlined in the syllabus. We cannot allow every minor incident to interfere with their minor incident. Am I the only one who hasn't lost their mind? If this is what you consider routine, then I don't want to know, Mr. Vermal. She spoke in that tone that always silenced me, as if she commanded my very mind. In the silence, she let out a long sigh. When her voice returned, I couldn't tell that she was leveling with me or humoring me. Tell you what, I can tell you've had a very stressful day. Why don't you take the rest of it off? I can have a substitute fill in while you get some rest, okay? I wanted to argue, to scream and shout, but I realized how my students were looking at me and noticed the tears on my cheeks. Needless to say, I did end up taking the day off. All the while, I agonized over whether to quit. I mean, this was supposed to be my big break. My first real teaching job since the incident a few years back. No more tutoring, no more subbing, getting to head my very own class and create my own lesson plans. I spent the night on the couch watching the news like a hawk. It was all still small town nonsense. A cat stuck in a tree, a charming local bake sale, not a word about whatever happened in the school on the mountainside. The headmistress's gaslighting was starting to work on me. If nobody saw anything wrong with what had happened, then the problem must be me, right? I must have misinterpreted everything. There had to have been some reasonable explanation for what I've seen and heard. So the next morning, it was right back to work. The thing is, I've never gotten an explanation for what the Integration Initiative was. I assumed it was some sort of remedial educational program, After all, the bulk of my class was severely behind by 5th grade standards. Many needed to learn basic social behaviors, properly expressing their emotions, and how to read or write, or even how to speak at all. The Hastings twins, for instance, they were brother and sister, or so I've been told, but near impossible to tell apart. They were both so androgynous, with flawless pale skin, totally free from even a single strain of hair, even eyebrows. They never emoted, never reacted, never even blinked. If you didn't know any better, you assumed they were mannequins set up at their desks, positioned to stare at me in perfect stillness as I taught. But those were just more of the extreme examples. A few more were like normal kids, just a little behind. Katie, for instance. When I had a quiet moment in class that day, I noticed her completing a maze in her coloring book with a crayon and beckoned her over. She sat politely across from me as I composed myself. Katie, I just wanted to say you were very brave to speak up yesterday. I know that must have been scary. School is supposed to be a safe place. If you ever need to talk to me about anything, you can just come and let me know, okay? She stared at me for a moment and then said, as casually as you discussed the weather, I hope he suffered. There was a long silence. I blinked, trying to register what I'd heard. What? I hope he died real slow, she continued. Her face was blank, a tone flat. I hope they took their time with him. I hope that he felt every moment of it. I wiped the sweat from my brow. That's not... He was a hunter, Mr. Vermal. He deserved it. She insisted. I hope they hurt him really, really badly. I hope they took him somewhere so they can keep him alive. I hope they're taking away his fingernails and his teeth and his eyes, and he's crying and screaming. And Katie, I suddenly cut in. Do you remember how we talked about no subjects? She nodded. After all, we spent a lot of time in class discussing what was appropriate to say. I continued, trying to hide the quiver in my voice. Well, it's not appropriate to talk about, death and suffering. It was like a switch flipped. In an instant, Katie went right back to being just an ordinary little girl. Oh, sorry, Mr. Vermal. I'll remember that for next time. And just like that, she went right back to her desk, leaving me dazed and stunned like I had just been punched in the teeth. Even now, I can't help but wonder what she meant by next time. I've learned my lesson. Never talk about what happened to anyone, not even mention it. And the same goes for any other strange oddities I'm beginning to notice around the school. Like the ditch full of shed skins of something much larger than any reptile we have up here in Colorado. Or the sound of loud TV static emanating from a bathroom I'm 100% certain had no television. All of this completely normal to everyone around me, but I can't get it out of my mind. I still check the news and Google obsessively, but can't find the slightest mention of anything off about this place. I did, however, notice something on Facebook. Someone local was asking whether anybody had seen her brother, William, a heavy-set man with a big bushy beard who'd gone missing without even his PLB being able to report any location. The post had been made the day after the incident I'd witnessed. Apparently, the last time they'd spoken, William said that he was going out on a hunting